Our next short story is from Ben Jones, who's director of the Tableau Public business at Tableau. And part of what Ben does is lead a team to work with Tableau authors all over the world. Ben travels around meeting authors in the community, working and trying to make Tableau Public a better tool. In his spare time, he also works on data visualization. He runs a blog called Data Remix, so it's kind of a daytime, nighttime passion for data with Ben. And happy to welcome him here for the next short story.
Great, thanks a lot, Ellie. Just give me a moment here to hook up. It's nice to be around a group of people that get all excited about a new data set they get their hands on. So Tapestry is an event that I've just really enjoyed being a part of. This is my third time, and I'd like to thank the chair people of the Tapestry conference for inviting me. Of course, I'm one of them, so there's that. Well, I am the product director of Tableau Public, and I get to work with a really talented group of people. Many of them are here today with us, but we watch the amazing work of people all around the world as they're creating and sharing data stories. Yeah, thanks. And what I'd like to talk to you today about is 7 data story types. So I'd like to just start the, one second. Thank you, everyone. All right, great. So there we have it, 7 data story types. A thought starter. Before I go into my materials, though, I want to show you a short little video. And let me actually connect the audio, too. So hopefully that will take less time. OK, there we go. And unmute. OK. Ooh, that's stressful getting set up like that on the fly. All right, I'm good to go. Here we go. We'll play that.
Well, there's no reason why the simple shapes of stories can't be fed into computers. They are beautiful shapes. This is the GI axis, good fortune, ill fortune. Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now, this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now, this is an exercise in relativity, really. Is the shape of the curves is what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average. Is why get a depressing person? We'll start... The whole thing, we call this story Man in Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's just a good way to remember it. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it. All right, not copyrighted. Another story, also a beautiful curve and easily fed into a computer, called Boy Gets Girl, but it needn't be that. Just a way to remember it. Start on an average day, average person, not expecting anything to happen a day like any other. Find something wonderful, just loves it. Oh, God damn it. Got it?
All right, anyone recognize who that is? Kurt Vonnegut, right. What's funny about that is actually he submitted that for a master's thesis, and it was turned down. So I guess he went the other route of having his ideas heard, which is to write the next great American novel. Christopher Booker, more recently, came up with a book here called The 7 Basic Plots. And so similar kind of an attempt to categorize or group stories, movies, books, Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, Voyage and Return, comedy, tragedy, rebirth. I think you can see all 7 of these on any one episode of Downton Abbey. What about data? So could we do something similar with data? We gave it a shot. But before we do that, I think we kind of need to have a quick definition about what a data story is. And there's been a lot of discussion and debate and really interesting discussions about that exact subject. So the question, what is a data story, I don't think will be resolved here. I think it's different things for different people, but a really famous paper on the subject by Jeff here and his colleague there made the following statement: though data visualization often evokes comparisons to storytelling, the relationship between the two is rarely articulated clearly. And that's very true. I think that's definitely the case. And different people, again, have different opinions. But as I would like to kind of propose for our purposes here, certainly during my short story, is that a data story is just a quantitative visual narrative. And by narrative, I mean a series or a sequence of points that would be made. And that's what differentiates a data story, at least in the context here of this presentation. And to meet this need for this really interesting kind of way of showing people, readers, and audience a data story in sequential facts or points, Tableau last year released a version of our software with a feature called Story Points. And I was really excited about it, because in the summertime we released it, and I was really interested in finding out what journalists were going to do with this feature that allows people to essentially walk through a data story just like it were a slideshow or whatnot. And so it didn't take long for us to find out. It was actually really amazing. We had a data storytelling theme for the month of July. My team also picks and curates and publishes a Viz of the Day, where we choose one visualization out there in the wild, and we publish it out there on our site. And we were like, hey, let's see if we can get a Viz of the Day that's story points for the whole month of July. Can we do that? It was only about a week after we had launched the feature. And we were pretty excited to find out all 23 of the business days in the month of July had an amazing story points visualization, everything from poaching rhinos in South Africa to the urbanization of China, created by Mark Jackson right here in the audience, and a number of other really amazing story points visualizations. So that was really cool, and we started seeing all these data stories that people were telling about all kinds of topics, really fascinating stuff. And so we said, well, hey, are there ways we can kind of like find out the similarities between them or put together this kind of building block pieces of what makes a data story? And we did. We came up with 7. Now, I would put this out there as just a thought starter in the sense that I don't think this is comprehensive. I'm a big believer that, just like every story or every person, there's much richness and texture that happens at an individual level. I say that because oftentimes I tell my kids, hey, I'm just a Ben of one. So I definitely believe in the richness at the individual level, but at the same time, there are things that are common, and so we like to try to kind of walk through that. So I'm going to take a data set here that you can find online. It's by an organization called Freedom House, and it's freedom of the press data. Here's a screenshot of the spreadsheet, and I'd like to just kind of walk through maybe some data stories and to illustrate them. I'm also, after going through these different points, I'll layer in an example here or there from what we've seen out there in the wild, where you can see kind of full publication quality level work. For what we'll do to illustrate the 7 points, we'll just make something simple, okay? Let's see if we can do that. Can we really make 7 different data stories out of what's a pretty simple data set, right? It looks like it's about 7 or 8 columns here, and you got country and region and year. So let's give it a shot. Change over time. So we can start off by counting countries and how whether or not they are free. And this is essentially, again, looking at a variety of factors that we're going to get into about what makes a country, what makes the press free, partly free or not free, based on some scoring. And so we can see that in 2001, there were 75 countries classified as free. And we can advance it ahead and see that up until this past year, that number has declined, and now there's only 63 countries that would be classified as free. So change over time. People love to see these flows. They love to see how things are changing, right, over the course of our lives. Chad just showed some temperature type graphs, and so just how things are changing over time is so just important to what you would want to put in a data story. And then you can maybe just focus in on the free ones only and say, well, look at the trend there, right? We're definitely seeing a declining trend in the number of free countries, certainly over the course of the time that this data was collected. So change over time. It's a pretty simple kind of a data story type. Here's an example, and this comes from CNBC. This is John Schoen, and actually worked in collaboration with Tara Walker, who's also here at the session. But John and Tara worked together to show how the Dow 30 has changed over the decades in the United States. And so you almost see this visual history of the United States as told through a simple metric, right? An index. 30 countries chosen to be in the Dow 30. And you can see the present recovery, or go back in time another decade and see the Great Recession. You can even go back yet another decade and see the tech boom and see how things just really skyrocketed, right? You're kind of seeing history play out, 80s. And we can keep going back in time. The inflation in the 70s or the 60s. What happened after the war, or even going back further in the war. And of course, an event we all know about, the Great Depression. So you see how this history is told here through a stacked area chart, right? And it's really fascinating to see that change over time. All right, so let's take a look at another kind of data story, drill down. So we can take a look at a world map here and see that it's about broken up into thirds. For the most part, we've got about 33 roughly, right, percent are free, partly free, or not free. But we can then say, well, we'd like to drill in a little bit here. What about in Asia? And we can take a look at just that region and the fact that, wow, more than half of the region would we have the freedom of the press there is just not there. And then zooming in further, the one that has the poorest score there is North Korea. Of course, this isn't the only story that we would probably have heard about North Korea in the press. There's another one. Zooming out. So this would be almost the reverse of that, where instead of going from a big story down to a particular, we can reverse that order and start at the particular and move out to the general. Sort of like what Chad was talking about, right? Now, this is my attempt to keep up with the skeletons, but you might want to start with the individual and then go out to a larger group of people and see how that compares. So we can look at the 3 countries with the best scores. Sweden, Norway, and the Netherlands have the best score. They have a freedom score of 10. And in the world of this freedom of the press score by Freedom House, lower scores are better. All right, but then we can say, well, let's zoom out to all of Europe, and we can see that over 2 in 3 European countries would be classified as free. And then again, showing the whole world view. And being able to have that kind of a sequence or progression, zooming out, is great. I mean, these ones are great for hierarchies. These are, companies have business units and departments and then groups. Sports have leagues and conferences and then divisions or teams. So these kinds of zoom in, zoom out opportunities in data are really everywhere. Let's flip to look at contrasting. So people love the Rocky story, right? The 2 things pitted against each other with very dramatic differences. So showing differences in the data set can be something very powerful. Like, let's take a look, for example, at, well, who's at the top and the bottom? So if we take a look at the top, we can see, wow, how interesting. All of the top 10 countries, the ones with the best ratings, are all in Europe. Not just in Europe, but they seem to almost lie on one specific longitude there. And then we can say, well, but on the other side of the coin, right? The flip side of that is that there are actually 10 countries that have the worst scores. And here they are. There's 197 total countries, and this is 188 through 197. And there's North Korea off to the right, but you notice right away, wow, look at the spread here. In fact, there's 5 different regions included here in this data set. It's not just in one place. Journalists and the press are under a lot of pressure in a variety of regions around the world. So contrasting, the high and the low, showing the min and the max, showing who's at the top and the bottom of those spectrums. So contrasts are great. A great way to help people see, this is kind of the dark side of the force versus this is Yoda versus Vader, that kind of a thing, right? I mean, it's a really interesting story, and people want to see what's going on there. Why are there so amazing differences that's going on? Here's an example of that kind of a contrast. This was published by Inga Ting at the Sydney Morning Herald. Actually, this one came out a day after we launched the product. I still haven't figured out how she did it. So we're like, wow, that was quick. So she's showing Australia and how Australia shoulders the refugee burden around the world. Every bubble there is a country, and in this case, it's looking at just the number of refugees, right? Just simply the number. And the orange one there in the bottom left, well, that's Australia, and the gray ones are low, and the blue ones are high income, right? So just number of refugees total. Well, Australia ranks 48. Okay, that's helpful. But then we can take a look at it in contrast that with what happens when you consider their ranking, which drops to 62 for if you look at refugees as a share of the population. And then finally, what if you look at their rank as it compares to GDP? Well, they dropped even further to rank 74th. So this progression, right, of kind of different contrasting rankings for the country of Australia based on different factors. Kind of comparing totals to rates, that's a great way to contrast different things within the same kind of data story. All right, back to our freedom of the press. I love intersections. These are things that cross over, right? We want to know, this is kind of this dramatic moment where someone catches up with someone or passes another, kind of like, I guess that's probably why people watch NASCAR at all, but you, you want to see when things are going to go from less than something to more than something. So let's take a look at the count of countries by their rating, free, not free, and partly free. Starting off in 2001, you can see actually there are more countries that are free than any other rating, and then not free, and then partly free. But if we play that forward, we can see that actually in 2009, right, so the number of partly free countries kind of crisscrosses over the not free. And you get a situation there where you say, okay, well, hey, this seems like it's a good thing, right? The not free is now the least common of all the categories. But if we play it forward a little more, you can see that partly free is kind of growing even so much that it passes the number of free countries. So maybe a little concerning there, right? And then what happens at the very end there is that the not free country actually jumps over the free, and what you have now is a total reversal of the order in terms of what's common and in terms of just the number of countries with these classifications. Now you've got free countries is actually the least common of all the categories, right? So this kind of crisscrossing types of intersections make for great data stories. People want to know why, what happened there that caused this change and this kind of overtaking, right? All right, moving along here, 6, factors. Factors are great. They're different than contrast because contrast is this versus that. Factors are more things that work together to build up to a higher level effect. So maybe components or pieces of a puzzle, and they combine, right? Something in some way, maybe there's additive or maybe they're multiplicative. Well, the interesting thing about the freedom of the press score is that, actually start over here on just the overall score, you can see again, remember, scores that go up, that's bad. Slowly, overall, on an average level, scores are slightly going up, and this is all around the world. But the score itself is the sum of 3 different factors: legal, economic, political. Legal on the top in turquoise, green, economic, and then orange, political. So you can see how the different factors together make up this overall score, right? Now, what you could do then is if in a stacked bar, it's sort of hard to see which one's going up or down, right? If you view it like that, but if we separate them out as lines, which you can see as clearly, at least on average, you have legal and economic scores are roughly flat or pretty stable, but certainly what we see there is political pressures climbing. So again, different factors, different pieces of the puzzle that add up. Those make for really interesting data stories as well. Okay, moving on, here's a great example of that, and this is actually one that was created by Matt Francis in the UK, and he was showing sun and the weather. Obviously a very interesting relationship there, right? So this is kind of, again, one of the more publication quality ones we can check out. But he's talking about the cycle, a number of sunspots, right, that are kind of going on here, and then looking at cosmic rays. So this is another factor, and seeing how that combines then with solar irradiation, and finally global temperatures. And then he allows you to explore, and you can check it out, and you can look at different kinds of pieces of this story layered over one another. Okay, so again, a great data story there. You can see some correlation effect there. All right, last one is I think my favorite one, Outliers. I think scatter plots are a great way to show. We've seen a few already today. Not always, right? Like what we saw there with Hannah changing from a scatter plot view to a bar chart view. But they can be great ways to show 2 factors. When you combine size and color, you can look at 3 or even 4 factors at a time. So really powerful. Now, if we take all the countries and look at a little box plot here, we can see that, well, there's really no outlier. They're all between the top and the bottom of the whiskers on the box plot here. But if we break it into regions, we'll start to see some outliers. So this is looking at this exact same data by region, and we can see, well, hey, in Oceania, even though it's partly free, we see as Fiji is substantially higher in score here, right? Which we know would be, a worse kind of a situation than all the other countries in Oceania. And then in Europe, you have Belarus and Russia, which are much poorer freedom scores there as well, compared to other countries in their region. These comparisons, we want to see things that are much different. And we look at that and go, why? What's going on? Why is it the case? Well, on the positive side, then you look at the Middle East, and you see an outlier there in 2013 as well, where you have a much better freedom of the press score. So outliers are wonderful ways. You don't have to only use box plots, clearly. You can see timelines and spikes and things like that. But we really are fascinated by things that are much different than other things like them. Okay, so how many more, that was a really simple data set. And I think the thing I want to impress you with is just that we just told 7 different data stories with a pretty simple data set. And I don't know, I think there are more. I don't know if we've exhausted here all of the possible angles you could take on this data story. I think there's a lot more out there. There's many, many more. And that to me is what is so great about data visualization, is that you take a group in a room like this, and you'll find lots of different angles on the very same data set. There's lots of ways to consider and think about it. And that's why there's room for a lot of individual contributions and perspectives. So these are 7 building blocks, and again, we'll probably add 8 and 9 and 10 here going forward, but hopefully that's a little thought starter, and you can take that, and as you go back, think of ways to take the data you're working with and think of it along those lines. All right, so thank you very much. I appreciate your time.